The first of the month came and went, a silent, mocking milestone on the calendar. I stared at it from my perch on the worn-out sofa, a hand-me-down from a friend who'd upgraded. The rest of the apartment held a similar story: a coffee table with a mysterious water ring forever etched into its surface, a bookshelf made of cinderblocks and planks, and a persistent, faint smell of damp concrete that no amount of airing out could ever truly eliminate. This was my life, my kingdom, a one-bedroom basement apartment in a decent part of Cincinnati that was just cheap enough to be a constant, grinding financial anxiety. My name is Sarah, I'm 24, and I work 2 jobs. During the week, I'm a receptionist at a small dental practice, all fake smiles and scheduling appointments for people with dental plans. On weekends, I wait tables at a family-style diner, my feet screaming in protest by the end of a double shift. I was treading water, but lately, it felt like the current was getting stronger. This month, the current had become a riptide. My ancient, loyal Honda Civic, Betty, had decided her transmission had suffered enough. The repair bill was a number so large it felt abstract, like the national debt. I'd handed over every penny of my meager savings, maxed out a credit card I'd been carefully trying to pay down, and was now facing the reality that the $850 rent was due, and I had exactly $412.17 to my name. The grace period was 5 days. Those 5 days were a special kind of torture. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap into my throat. Every footstep on the porch above my ceiling sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. It was Mr. Peterson, my landlord. He had to be coming for the rent. Mr. Peterson was an enigma. He was a man in his late 60s, I guessed, with a full head of startlingly white hair and a posture so straight you could use him as a ruler. He was always dressed in clean, pressed jeans and a collared shirt, even when he was just coming over to fix a leaky faucet. He wasn't unfriendly, but he was reserved. Our interactions were strictly business. A nod, a quiet, "Miss Sarah," the exchange of a check, and then he'd be on his way. He spoke in a low, measured tone, and his eyes, a pale, watery blue, seemed to take in everything. I'd always assumed he was a stern, no-nonsense type of man. The kind of man for whom a late rent payment was a personal insult, a breach of a sacred contract. On the morning of the 6th day, the dreaded knock finally came. It wasn't loud or angry, just 3 firm, deliberate raps on my door. It was the sound of inevitability. My stomach plummeted. I'd been practicing my speech all morning. "Mr. Peterson, sir, I am so sorry, my car broke down, it was an emergency, I can have half now and the rest next week." I swear, it sounded weak even to my own ears. I took a deep, shaky breath, smoothed down my wrinkled work shirt, and opened the door. He stood there, silhouetted against the gray morning light. Same crisp jeans, same collared shirt, a muted plaid today. In his hand was not an eviction notice, but his familiar, leather-bound ledger. "Miss Sarah," he said, his voice even. "Mr. Peterson," I stammered, my rehearsed speech evaporating from my brain. I'm so sorry. The rent, I have part of it. I can give you $400 today and I will have the rest for you by Friday, I promise. My car, I trailed off, my face burning with humiliation. I couldn't even meet his gaze. I stared at the worn welcome mat, at his scuffed but clean work boots. He was silent for a moment, a silence that felt heavier than any yelling could have. Then, he did something unexpected. "May I come in?" he asked, his tone not demanding, but gentle. My head snapped up. That wasn't in the script. Landlords didn't ask to come in. They demanded payment on the doorstep. Confused, I just nodded and stepped aside, holding the door open. He walked in, his eyes doing their usual quick scan of the apartment. I saw it through his eyes. The single, sad banana on the counter, the stack of past due bills next to my laptop, the blanket on the sofa where I'd been sleeping fitfully, too anxious to even make it to my bed. "I made coffee," I blurted out, a pathetic attempt at normalcy. "Would you like some?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in those pale blue eyes other than quiet assessment. It looked like sadness. "Yes," he said, "thank you, that would be nice." I moved to the kitchen, my hands trembling as I poured the cheap, bitter brew into 2 mugs. I handed one to him, and he took it, nodding his thanks. He didn't sit, but he leaned against the back of my sofa, looking strangely large and out of place in my small, cluttered space. "Miss Sarah," he began, setting his mug down on the coffee table, right on top of the water ring. "I've been your landlord for, 2 years now? Almost. I whispered, my throat tight. In that time, he continued, you have never been late. Not once. Your rent check is always in my mailbox by the 1st. You're quiet. You keep the place clean. You are, in every sense of the word, a good tenant. I just stared at him, completely bewildered. This was not the direction I thought this conversation was going to go. So, he said, picking up his ledger. He opened it, and I braced myself for the figures, for the late fees, for the stern lecture. But he didn't look at the numbers. He pulled out a small, faded photograph that was tucked into the back cover and handed it to me. It was a picture of a young woman, probably around my age, with a bright, open smile and laughing eyes. She was standing next to an old car, one hand resting on its hood. She looked vibrant, full of life. That's my daughter, Emily, Mr. Peterson said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. This was taken about 25 years ago. I held the photograph, unsure of what to say. The woman in the picture was beautiful and seemed so alive. She was about your age, he said, taking the photo back and looking at it with a profound tenderness that transformed his entire face. Full of dreams. Wanted to be a graphic artist. She was stubborn, independent. Just like you. He took a slow sip of his coffee, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. She was struggling, too. Just starting out, waitressing, trying to make ends meet while she built her portfolio. She lived in an apartment not unlike this one. A little place over in Covington. He paused, collecting himself. The only sound in the room was the hum of my old refrigerator. 1 month, she was late on her rent. Not by much. A week. She was too proud to call me and her mother, too scared to tell her landlord. She was trying to figure it out on her own. He looked directly at me, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it was almost physical. The night she was going to go and talk to him, to ask for a few more days, her car, she lost control on a wet road. She was going too fast, probably stressed, rushing between jobs. He didn't have to say the rest. The finality in his tone said it all. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and heavy. Oh, Mr. Peterson, I breathed, tears welling in my eyes. I'm so sorry. He nodded, blinking rapidly. For a long time, I was lost. Her mother, she passed a few years after. A broken heart, I think. I sold my business, I retreated. This house, these apartments, they were all I had left. For years, I was just going through the motions. A stern landlord, collecting rent, fixing pipes. It was a way to exist. He took a deep, shuddering breath and looked around my apartment again, but this time, his gaze wasn't that of a landlord. It was that of a father. And then you moved in, he said. A young woman, all on your own, working 2 jobs, always polite, always responsible. I saw echoes. Every time I saw you rushing to your car, or coming home late, looking tired, it reminded me of her. It was a pain, at first. A constant reminder. But then, it became something else. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out not a bill, but my rent check from last month. He tore it in half, then again, letting the pieces fall onto my coffee table. My dear, he said, his voice firm now, but kind. The rent for this month is paid in full. I stared at the torn pieces of paper, my mind refusing to process what he was saying. What? No, Mr. Peterson, I can't let you. I'll pay you, I just need a little more time. Sarah, he said, using my first name for the first time ever. Listen to me, the rent is paid, consider it a scholarship, from Emily. Tears were now streaming freely down my face. I couldn't speak, I just stood there, shaking my head, a mess of confusion, grief, and overwhelming relief. That's not all, he said, and he almost smiled. It was a small, tentative thing, but it changed his entire demeanor. I am an old man with a very large, very empty house and a pension I never seem to spend. I am also, though I don't like to boast, a very capable handyman. I understand from the noise your car was making last week that Betty has seen better days. I let out a wet, choked laugh at his use of my car's name. I would like to offer you a deal, he continued. A proper one, no arguments. I will take care of Betty's repairs. I have a friend who owns a shop, I'll cover the cost. And in return, you will do 2 things for me. Anything, I whispered, my voice hoarse. First, you will stop working weekends at the diner. Use that time, I don't care if you use it to sleep, to paint, to learn the tuba. But use it for yourself. For your dreams, whatever they are. And the second thing, I asked, barely daring to breathe. The second thing, he said, and now the smile reached his eyes, is that you will come upstairs for dinner every Sunday. My cooking isn't anything special, but it's edible. And a man gets tired of eating alone. The dam finally broke. I started sobbing, great, heaving sobs that came from a place of exhaustion and a sudden, shocking reprieve I had never dared to dream of. I cried for his lost daughter, I cried for my own struggle, and I cried for the sheer, unbelievable kindness of this man I thought I knew. He didn't try to hug me or comfort me physically. He just stood there, a solid, quiet presence, letting me fall apart until the storm passed. When I finally regained some composure, wiping my face with my sleeves, I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't just my landlord anymore. He was William Peterson, a man who had known immense loss, and who had chosen, in this small, quiet way, to fight against the cruelty of the world by offering a hand to a stranger. I don't know what to say, I managed. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, he said, a hint of a twinkle in his eye. You haven't tasted my meatloaf. That was the beginning. The true story, the one that still feels like a dream, started that day. True to his word, Mr. Peterson, William, as he now insisted I call him, had Betty towed to his friend's garage. They replaced the transmission, and when I tried to bring up payment, he just shook his head and changed the subject. The following Sunday, with a knot of nervousness in my stomach, I went upstairs to the main house for the first time. It was a time capsule. The furniture was solid, old, and well cared for, but the air was still and silent. There were photographs everywhere, a young William with a beautiful woman who must have been his wife. And Emily, at all ages, a gap-toothed grin in a school picture, a cap and gown graduation photo, the picture he'd shown me by the car. Her presence filled the house. Dinner was, as promised, a simple meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. It was, also as promised, just edible. But it was one of the best meals I'd ever had. The conversation was stilted at first, two lonely people navigating an unexpected new relationship. But he asked me about my life, my family back in Ohio, what I wanted to do. I told him about my secret dream, one I'd never admitted to anyone. I wanted to be a writer. He didn't laugh. He just nodded thoughtfully. Emily was an artist. The world needs its storytellers, too, he said. That became our routine. I quit the diner job. The first Sunday I had off, I slept for 14 hours straight. The freedom was intoxicating. I started writing, tentatively at first, then with growing passion, filling notebooks with stories and ideas. My Sundays with William became the anchor of my week. I learned about his life. He'd been an engineer, he and his wife had traveled to Italy once, he hated reality television but had a secret fondness for detective shows. I started bringing dessert, and then eventually, I started helping him cook, introducing him to recipes my mom had taught me. The dynamic shifted slowly. I wasn't just a tenant he was helping, I became a friend. He started coming out of his shell. One day, he asked to read something I'd written. It was a short story about a young woman and an old man who become unlikely friends. He read it in silence, and when he finished, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "She would have loved this." Months turned into a year. My financial situation stabilized completely without the drain of the second job and the constant car worries. I paid my rent on time every month, and William always accepted it with a quiet nod, though he never cashed the first check after the deal, framing it instead with a note that read, "The day I got a second chance." One evening, he surprised me. "I've been thinking," he said over a dinner, "of my lasagna. This house is too big for one old man. And that basement apartment is too damp for a writer with dreams. The room at the end of the hall upstairs, it gets the morning light. Emily's old room, I've kept it as it was. But I think it's time. Would you consider moving upstairs? There would be no extra rent. Just less loneliness for me." I moved in the next month. The room was beautiful, filled with light and the ghost of a young woman's dreams. It felt like a blessing, not an intrusion. William and I became a family, a small, patched-together unit of two. My writing improved. With the stability and encouragement, I finished a manuscript. I was terrified to send it out, but William wouldn't hear of it. He drove me to the post office himself to mail the query letters. A year after that, I got the call. A small, independent press wanted to publish my novel. When I told William, he cried. We both did. He went out that very day and bought a bottle of expensive champagne, and we drank it out of his late wife's fancy crystal flutes, toasting to Emily, to second chances, and to stories. The book did modestly well, but it was enough. Enough to get an agent, to start a second one. Enough to build a real career. Last week, I signed the papers on my own small condo. It was time for William to have his space back, and for me to truly stand on my own 2 feet, this time from a place of strength, not fear. As I was packing the last of my boxes, I found him sitting in the living room, looking at a picture of Emily. "You know," he said without looking up, "saving you that day, it saved me, too." I sat down next to him and took his hand. "You didn't just save me, William. You gave me my future back." The story that started with a late rent payment didn't end with an eviction notice. It ended with a family found in the most unexpected of places. It's a story about the walls we build around our grief and how sometimes, a crack in that wall can let the light in for everyone. It's a reminder that you never truly know the battles someone else is fighting, and that an act of kindness, no matter how small it seems, can rewrite the story of a life. My landlord's surprise wasn't just about forgiving a debt. It was about offering a hand from the depths of his own sorrow, and in doing so, pulling us both back into the light.